see what we can do, get through class and see if we can't learn something. See if y'all can't teach me something. We're going to start off with our daily Bible reading. Number 102, 3, and 4, which is 1 Kings 1 through 1 Kings chapter 7. We have in 2 Samuel is a book about David. And as Philip's gone over, it talks about chapters 1 through 10. It's talking about his triumphs that he had. And 8 through 10 is his military victories. And chapter 11 is the famous sin that David had with Bathsheba. In chapters 12 through 24, we have David's troubles that come with that sin. This week, our reading that we're going to go start is 1 Kings chapter 1. And what is 1 Kings about? Who's it about? Yes, about Solomon, about the reign of Solomon. What happens in chapter 1? What's David's situation here?
He's old.
He is old. How old was he when he died? 70. Seems kind of young. It's getting real close, isn't it, Gene? But he was 70 when he died. But he's in the situation where he's not doing well, and what do they do for him? What is it's done for him to keep him warm?
Get a young lady to stay with us.
Yeah, Abishag is given to him to keep him warm in his old age. What else takes place in chapter 1?
Solomon's anointed king.
He's anointed king. What about Adonijah?
He wants to be. He tries
He
to
wants
set himself up as king.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
trying to usurp the throne, as they say.
that's right. Exactly. Try to get the men around to gather around him and usurp the throne. Tries to exalt himself to kingship, doesn't he? But Nathan goes to King David and asks if Adonijah's king, and obviously he's not. And Zadok anoints Solomon as the king. 1 Kings chapter 2. What's happening?
David gives charge to Solomon about what he wants him to do.
Right. David's about to die, and he gives Solomon his marching orders. And he tells him to prove himself a man. Keep the charge of the Lord and walk in his ways. And how long did David reign? 40 years, didn't he? Sure did. It says, I come up with 7 years in Hebron and like 33 in Jerusalem. What's something else interesting towards the end of the chapter? How about Shimei? He did, wasn't he? Why did he get executed? What did he do that got him executed?
He didn't follow he had cursed David when
Mhm.
David was king, but David allowed him to live. And then Solomon told him he could stay, because as long as he stayed within the boundaries and did not go out of those boundaries, he could continue to live. Then servants of his crossed over, he went to get them and came right back, but the point is, he crossed the boundaries.
He didn't keep his promise, did he?
Solomon found out, and he was executed.
Yep. He didn't keep his promise. And Solomon kept his. Chapter 3.
David, I think it's interesting at the very last verse there of chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
The very last sentence. You know, after Shimei, has been told to be killed. It says, "So the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon." It's like he did this act, and now it's solidified.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of an interesting. You know, you got to kill somebody.
He's in rule now.
Right.
Yeah, you don't cross it.
Yeah,
So-
Solomon picked, I guess Solomon, I don't know if it was Solomon, Joab picked out Benaniah as the hit man. And so
Yeah.
we hear about him some more.
Yep.
Yeah. Good points.
Maybe that's a poor term.
First Kings chapter 3, we have Solomon marrying someone, and where's she from?
Egypt.
Egypt. Does not present him in a good situation. What does the Lord do for Solomon in this chapter?
He gives him his wisdom. You know, he prays for wisdom, and you know, gives him the wisdom.
Right.
But I think it's important. You know what you were just saying. You know, they've been told, don't marry outside. Don't marry outside. Now the king does.
Right.
And then that's kind of, one of the things that you start seeing the kingdom start unraveling.
That's right. And it unravels Solomon's life.
It does.
It sure does. To be the wisdom that God gave him, he still was entrapped with those foreign women and what they led him to worship and do with idolatry.
Just like I said, if I had to get wisdom, but to use it is something else.
That's a good point.
That's a good point. It's great to learn, to read, and to know God's will, but you got to put it into practice, don't you?
So this is the chapter where the famous passage where he's going to, says he'll divide the baby.
Oh, yeah. That shows his wisdom, doesn't it? That's pretty wise there. For him to be able to reason through that and do that. Any other comments before we go to chapter 4?
You know, like in verse 14, it's got that condition because Solomon said, if you walk in my ways and keep my commandments as your father David walked, then I will prolong your days.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do what I expect you to do.
Yeah, then I'll prolong your days.
Yeah.
And that's the same with God throughout the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
You got to do what he tells you to do, and he's going to be with you.
Right.
And take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't,
That's right. That's right.
You know, Israel had just come through the judges, and that would have been a perfect example of what, as long as we do what God says, we got peace.
Mm-hmm.
And when we turn from God, that's when the problem starts.
That's right. That's right. One thing that I remember also about Solomon building a house for his wife, and she wasn't able to stay in the house with the Lord. And he saw the significance of her being out of that and not being able to stay in that. So,
Solomon reigned about as long as David did, but he had 300 wives and 700 concubines. That's about a wedding a week. God allowed David and Solomon some latitude in their marriages because David had, I think he ended up with 6 or 7 wives himself, if you count Abishag.
right.
And, that's not how God meant it from the beginning.
That's right.
So he had some latitude with them.
Mhm.
And, that's just say that's God's business because I don't know any other way to describe that.
Right. I don't think you can explain it, really.
But, if he married an Egyptian, if that was his first wife, he might have already had a couple.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's noteworthy, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he even told him, don't go back to Egypt. Don't get horses from Egypt, And here he gets an Egyptian woman. So.
Don't build chariots with horses, and David had a few of those.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Good points.
I wonder if he still read the book of the law.
I wonder if he ever wrote it. Yeah, exactly. But it talks about how wise, it says he spoke 300 proverbs and 1,005 songs. But he falls short on some of those things. Of course, that's a good lesson for us. We fall short on things too. So, it's hard to shoot arrows at Solomon about all that because we fail also.
Another thing, he had a great bureaucracy in his government. People appointed to provide food to different areas and different times, he imposed a burden on the people of Israel in taxes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it talks about it in chapter 5, the very thing that you was talking about, what all it took for a day, you know. The food and all that, the wages from his servants.
I read that, and I remember what Samuel told the people when they wanted a king, said, if you get a king, this is what goes with it.
Yeah,
And now it's all coming back to what goes with being having a king.
that's right. That's exactly right. I just didn't know how good they had it. Something about wanting to be like the people, isn't it? What else we get? Talks about Solomon and building the temple here in chapter 5. I guess the process that he went through, all the men that it took. I thought it was very interesting that they quarried the stones in the quarry and brought them back, and there was no tool heard. There was no, no reform on them. They fit when they put them together. So I think that's pretty significant.
If you've ever built anything, that's hard to imagine.
Oh, it is. Especially the size that it was and all the intricate things that went into it. The workings of it.
Well, I guess for the first time I'm kind of seeing this, David couldn't build the temple because he was fighting wars back then with everybody that Solomon made peace with eventually. I don't know really the intricacies of all that, but you think Solomon married all those people to make peace with them? You know how they did back then? They had married to make peace with somebody, although it was against God's will.
Mhm.
But God worked it out to where the temple could be built through this. It's just, if that's the case, then it's just kind of thought-provoking thing to see how God works.
Mm-hmm.
Even in disobedience, sometimes God still works His will into things for the greater good to glorify Him. I don't know if that's the case, but, David certainly didn't intermarry or any of that business, but Solomon did, to the end he got the temple built as well. He was able to get all the material and all he needed for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it said David was not going to build a temple because he was a man of bloodshed. It talks about during the reign of Solomon, there was peace in the kingdom. So there was no war. So
David conquered all these things to make for the peace.
that's right. That's right. Good points. Okay. 1 Kings chapter 6. What's it? We're starting to talk about what is fixing to take place. It begins to do what?
Build the temple.
Build a temple. And how long has it been since it mentioned how long they've been from Egypt? 480 years they've been gone from Egypt. Okay. And it talks about it being in Solomon's 4th year and 2nd month that he began to reign, that he started to build the house of the Lord. And it took him pretty long, huh? 7 years to build. That's exactly right. 7 years. Okay. 1 Kings chapter 7 is our last one before we get into the life of Christ. And what's going on in chapter 7?
Solomon build his palace.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. He finishes it up. Also, he brings in the things that David has dedicated to the temple. So, okay, any comment or anything before we go to the life of Christ?
20 years of Solomon's life was passed during the building of the temple and the building of his house.
Yeah, it was 7 years for the temple, and then, was it 14, I believe, for his house? Is that right? 13? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that David had people working in foreign countries, cutting stones and cutting lumber, and there was over 150,000 workers.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you like that payroll?
Yeah.
had like 3,500 chief bosses, or I don't know what the terminology was, but that's just
It's unfathomable, really. And
an
you're talking about a network.
enormous bureaucracy and amounts of riches to get
Mhm.
that done.
Yeah. And then when he got it all built, he put gold over it on top of that, overlaid it with gold. So there was no shortage of wealth, that's for sure. Okay, we're in the last week of Christ's life. Major divisions, Philip has drilled into our minds, we should know it now.
Years of preparation,
Yeah, and how long did that last?
about 30 years.
30 years. After the years of preparation, we have the what? The beginning of ministry. It starts with baptism of Jesus. After his beginning ministry, he goes where?
Great Galilean ministry.
Galilean ministry, and it lasts about how long?
2 years.
2 years. That's right. After the Galilean ministry, they see the people start following him for the wrong reasons, and he does what?
Retirement.
Times of retirement. Withdraws to the mountains, and that lasts for about 6 months also. Then we have the closing ministry, and it lasts for,
6 months.
that's right, 6 months, okay? And that brings us down to the last week, okay? Last week, we have what happens on Friday. He arrives where? Bethany, okay? He arrives in Bethany. And we have on Saturday a feast given by whom?
Simon the leper.
Simon the leper. Okay, and do you remember who talked about people that were there?
Mary, Martha, Simon, Lazarus.
Mm-hmm. And what is, I guess, it's not important as anything else, but we have Mary breaking the glass, anointing Jesus' feet, and what happened, or who comes on, he's already on the scene, but what happens when she does that?
Judas.
Yeah.
Fucks
Ju-
his money.
That's right. She rebukes him, he rebukes her for doing that. And Jesus rebukes Judas. Okay? And when he does that, I have to think that put a little seed in his heart to do what he's going to do to betray the Lord in the future. So,
Well, it had to be very embarrassing.
yes. Yeah. So, and Satan uses that to carry out what he does. Sunday, we have the day of triumph where he enters into Jerusalem. Talked about the three things. First, he comes in, it's prophesied him coming in on the coat of a donkey, okay? And what's the three things?
Palm branches, the clothes, and then they're singing.
That's right, palm branches, laying the clothes down, and they sing in Hosanna, Son of David. And I was reading Hosanna, with term means to help or to save. To help or to save. So they were looking for help, and they were looking to be saved from what? The Roman Empire. That's right. But he wasn't here to save them from the Roman Empire. He was here to save them for their eternal soul. Okay, Monday has a day of authority. We have, first off, he shows his authority by doing what? Curses the fig tree. I read where this was sometime in the probably the spring of the year, where there would have been fruit left on from the previous season. This tree had leaves but no fruit. So Jesus curses it, showing his authority that way. We have, after the cursing of the fig tree, we have the cleansing of the temple for the second time, okay? Showing his authority, he says, my house is a house of prayer and not a den of thieves. So, and then we have the Greeks asked to see Jesus. he talks about, what does he use as an earthly example of what we're going to eat? The wheat. It must die, be buried and raised to bring life, okay? And that was in reflection of it talking about his death and what happened after that conversation. Voice from heaven came down. Some thought it was thunder, but it was a voice from heaven that came down saying, I have glorified it and will glorify it again. Okay? It wasn't for the purpose of Jesus, it was for the people's sake there. Okay. We have Tuesday, the day of conflict, where the fig tree is found withered when they go headed back to the temple, and he draws a lesson for the 12 there, for the lesson of faith, and it makes reference to that fig tree being withered from the root up, and I thought that's kind of significant. Usually you see everything it withers from the leaves down. So.
With that, if you just not familiar with the story of Jesus, and the fig tree seems insignificant.
You can read right past it, can't you?
Yes, and what's that? Well, it's a representation of his dealing with Israel, and he was getting a message across that y'all have had your chance, and you're short timers now.
Yeah, you're not, you're cursed, and you're not going to produce no more fruit.
And it's not like the Sanhedrin and all the Jewish hierarchy are not in there plotting every day, what can we do about this rebel? And he's making all this noise. Look what they did. Mm-hmm. Look at the people calling him the son of David, and of course they're going to involve the Romans in it. And think about Pilate sitting over here in his place and looking at all this. What is this? They calling somebody a king down here? What
Yeah.
the government going? What's Caesar going to do about me if I don't get this quiet?
Right.
So there's all that political and religious plotting
Mm-hmm.
going on.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yep. Good point. After we have this lesson on the faith, as far as the fig tree about being able to move mountains, we have Christ's authority challenged, and he asked him a question. Where did the baptism of John come from? From heaven or from men? Did he answer them? Did they answer him? No, he didn't answer. They didn't answer him. He said, I'm not going to answer you. Okay? Then we have, getting closer to the three parables, the warning parables. We have the parable of the two sons. This is the Monday, one day earlier from Jesus cleansing the temple. What is representative of the first son? What does the first son do? He says, I'll do what?
I won't go, he changed his mind and went.
Right, he changed his mind. And the second says, I'll go, and he didn't. Okay? And what was the purpose of this parable?
To show the Pharisees, the leaders, that you're like them, that those, even the people, the harlots and the tax collectors, they got a better chance to get to heaven than you got.
Right. They need to change.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. They need to change.
David, just want to make kind of a side note here. Randy and I were talking after Bible study last Sunday morning, and there are some translations that leave out in this section. For instance, verse 29, it said, "And he answered, and I will not."
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one that Randy had at that time stopped right there. It did not say anything about him changing his mind. There was a footnote that said that, but, you know, he said he missed the questions that were in the book
Mhm.
because of that. So this, you know, just a side note that, hey, it's important that when we're reading and we're studying, we kind of look at everything.
Right.
Because most of the newer translations have that in there.
Mhm.
The one that he had at the time was a little bit older that did not have that, and it's just a little bit different in the manuscripts.
Right.
But just kind of a side note, just a thought
Mhm.
about that we when we study, it's good sometimes to
To read several.
read several and to, you know, make sure what we're reading.
Yeah. Okay, and the second parable talks about the wicked husbandman, where the landowner being the Lord, Pharisees being the vine dressers, and the servants coming to collect the fruit, and what takes place to the servants? They're killed, right. Okay, and then after that, they send the son, he's killed, okay? So they recognize that he's talking about them. So we also have the parable of the marriage feast, where the chief priests and the elders are warned that they are rejecting the Savior. Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven and calls the people to the feast, and they don't want to what? They don't want to come, do they? Okay, they're not willing to come. He sends more invitations to the people, and they end up killing them. Okay, and Jesus talks about that they will be destroyed and they're going to burn their cities, and making reference to the city of Jerusalem. Okay, Philip mentioned to me there was a slide that he did not, and I don't know if I can get to it because I didn't even turn this thing on, a slide that he did not cover, and I thought it would be something good to cover, because in the first entrapment question talks about paying taxes to Caesar, okay? And what's tomorrow? Tomorrow's tax day. What a coincidence. You gotta love that. Let's see. It's in here somewhere. Here we are. Okay. Talks about our relationship to the civil government. Could be summarized, he says, in commandments to pray, pay, and obey. He's got 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Who's got that?
First of all, being I urge that entreaties and prayers, petitions, and thanksgiving be made on behalf of all men, for kings, for all who in authority, so that they may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all goodness, godliness, and dignity.
Okay, and I think we do that. We've heard that in our prayers here, that we pray for those who are leading us. Then we have responsibility to pay taxes. Matthew 21:21. Matthew chapter 21, verse 21. Kirsten, have you got that?
And Jesus answered them, truly I say to you, if you have faith and do not doubt, you will not only do what has been done for you.
Is that right? Yeah.
But even if you say to this mountain, be taken up and thrown to the sea, it will happen. Maybe it's Matthew 22.
What did I say?
It's 21.
It said Matthew 21:21.
20 through 21, it says, they said Caesar's, then he said to them, therefore render to Caesar the
Yes.
things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's.
Okay. That's right. And then Romans 13:7. Romans chapter 13 and verse 7. Josh?
Render therefore to all their due taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor.
Okay, so we see that we got a responsibility to pay to our government the taxes that are due to them. And the next to the last one is honor and to obey. That's Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. Patty, if you could read that. Actually, we'll just go 1 through 6.
Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God. The authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing.
Okay, so we have a responsibility to honor those people, don't we? And to obey them to the extent of what?
They don't
Just
get it-
blindly obey them?
They don't get into God's business.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You know, that's a real kind of, well, that's one of the more difficult commandments for us to understand, I guess. You know, we understand it's from God, it's God ordained, but you just look, you know, now and in history and all around the world, what some of the leaders have done, even in the Bible days. You know, how they oppressed, how they, you know, just willingly caused so much hardship on the people who they ruled over. And it's a very difficult, that's a real head scratcher, and has been for me, always has been for me, was that commandment. You know, I know, you know, should be in defiance, you know, or should we, you know, consider who we have now ruling the country and the type of people, just what are we supposed to do to alleviate that? You know?
All I know, God's in control. You know, that,
Yeah.
and he says to honor them. That can be very difficult when we see some of the things that are going on,
Honor,
you know. So, and we're to pay taxes, and we may not agree with everything that's going on. So, it's really a difficult situation, but we have to whittle on our end of the stick.
our whole country is founded on the fact that our forefathers rebelled against authority, and because of the, you know, they didn't want to pay taxes.
Right.
You know, that's the whole thing. It's just kind of ingrained in us in this country, in our culture. You know, when somebody acts against our interests, when the ruling authorities acts against our interests and infringe on our freedoms and rights and, you know, what's lawful, then, you know, we're to, in some form or fashion, try to, you know, get things more favorable to us.
Right.
And that includes, you know, all levels of authority and leadership, you know, what is within our to do so.
Mhm.
And it's the rulers who are going against the laws. Say, in this country, it's the rulers that are going against what is lawful.
Mhm.
So what do you do in such a thing? Because we have in our Constitution
Yeah.
what is lawful. So these folks over here are going against what is lawful.
Right.
So does that, give us the right to defy who the leadership is? You know, what the leaders who are doing something unlawful.
Mhm.
So that's the kind of position we're put in.
Right. Yeah,
Under the Roman law that the New Testament was during that period, Paul was able, as a Roman citizen, to use his right as a Roman citizen to expect some things out of the Roman government. He could appeal to Caesar instead of being judged by the local people. And he was granted that right. And when he was beaten in Philippi, he at least frightened the rulers there. He said, "You've beaten me uncondemned, a Roman citizen." Well, what the Roman law was, if you beat somebody uncondemned and misuse your power, you get to get beat too.
Right.
And so he was able to use the existing law to his benefit in those occasions. And so if we have an existing law to vote for somebody besides a criminal or an outlaw, and we can exercise that right as a citizen of America, and as long as that doesn't interfere with God's right, then
do that. Yeah.
but there's the situation where God rules in the affairs of men, and whoever is king, God made him king from the book of Daniel. And you might have to have a debate with yourself if you're voting for the one that God is going to put in there,
Right.
but the other one.
Right. And I believe, God is in control of everything, and I think we have in there the person because maybe it's to teach us a lesson. I don't know. But he's there for a reason.
Maybe he's just like allowing us to go through these times just to kind of remind us that he is in control. I don't know. It's probably given most folks that's moral and lawful and trying to do the right thing a wake-up call. Maybe in some kind of way we become complacent about things, about our leadership, about the things that are going on that's bringing us down, or idea of being a moral country, of having certain moral superiority over everyone else, when there's a whole lot going on.
Right.
Maybe that's it. I don't know, but
He may be trying to remind us in a roundabout way that this is not our home.
right.
You know,
And that's
And
certainly
Satan used it too. We've got it. We've had it good for a long time.
like Brother Phil said, we do not live. There's no way that there's no utopia on this earth. It never has been, never will be. But we can only strive to do. This is a work that we all are called to do to make this world a more, peaceful place to live in, and to work towards the end of knowing that, what we do on this earth that is going to be accountable in the next life too.
And no matter what happens here, there's something else to come.
Right.
No matter how bad it gets, there's something better. And maybe he's trying to teach us a lesson that maybe Satan's using a tool on us, giving us such an easy life down here, we get distracted from our goal in heaven.
I mean, Donald Trump, whoever gets it, they have their flaws and fallibilities too. He certainly has his. But I would be inclined to say I'm more hopeful that he gets it than anybody else, because he seems to try to act in accordance with the laws of the land. So, but it's either, the go-to, end all of everything. It's certainly not going to be his call.
No.
It's going to be the Lord's call.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You was talking about Satan, when he wants to get us. Look at Israel. they always went into positive, see, when they was in a time of peace.
Mhm.
When God had straightened everything out and they had it made, that's when they turned.
Right.
And so God is warning us, you know, when you're at your least vulnerable state, that's when Satan, he's ready for that.
Mhm. And the United States has had it pretty good for a while. So, I think there's some lessons that we can take home with that. And I hate to get started 3 minutes left to start with the greatest commandment. But just thinking the greatest commandment, what opportune time for this lawyer to ask this question, the greatest commandment, with the things that are going on against Jesus. You know, what is the greatest commandment? To love thy with all thy what? Heart, soul, mind, and strength, isn't it? If they were doing that,
This other didn't matter.
that's right. That's right. It didn't matter. Okay? So, I just thought it was an interesting, opportune time when he asked this question. And I'm gonna have to, I mean, we got 1 minute. So-
Then you talk about, if you see these Pharisees, they went, you know, supposed to allegedly the smartest people of all, asking the dumbest questions. And they continue, and after this thing, they can start getting somebody else to ask questions. You know?
Yeah.
This ain't looking good for us.
Right.
And I
And-
think about that sometimes, is, you know,
And the greatest commandment, we have to think, I gotta look at myself, you know? What does that mean to me? What is that gonna do for me if I do that? You know? That's the foundation of being what we need to be. And you can go back to the Good Samaritan, you know, the parable there. So,
but Dave, you got him coming in the tribal entry singing praises to it. Then less than what, 3 or 4 days later, they give us Barabbas,
That's right.
crucified.
that's right. Yeah. Wishy-washy people. So, okay, our time is up.